Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. The very first Apple II computer that I owned personally, it wasn't one that I shared with my family, was an Apple IIc. And I have a real soft spot in my heart for this little machine because I spent so many quality time hours with this thing as a youth. What Apple did in 1984 with the IIc is they took the Apple IIe, which had come out a year or two before, and they really condensed it all down to this one little portable machine, including built-in floppy drive and a whole selection of ports on the back. From a functionality standpoint though, when it comes to capabilities, pretty much exactly the same as a IIe, and that's not far off from what you could do on an Apple II Plus, which is really just an Apple II, which all came out in 1977. So even though this was released in 1984, yeah, it's a little bit behind the times, at least when it comes to its capabilities. It did have 128K, so that gave you some room for double high-res graphics and larger programs and stuff like that. Well, on today's video, I have these 4 barn-found Apple IIcs, and they're in really, really rough shape. I was told that all of these IIcs are actually parts machines, so that sort of implies that they don't work properly. But I'm curious if these things stood the test of time and actually do work and were just left for dead and neglected here, or there's something actually wrong with them. So without further ado, let's dig into all 4 of these machines. Well, as you can see, these machines are absolutely dirty, so I'm going to be wearing gloves at least for this initial phase where I'm handling these computers. Let's take a closer look at each one of these. So I'm just going to move them off the bench and we'll just go one by one and see. That is just so dirty. I can't even believe it. We'll look at these one by one, see what they look like. So all 4 of these machines came from the local Portland retro community here. They went on a rescue and they brought back a whole bunch of Apple machines, Macs and Apple IIs. And these 4 IIcs that I mentioned were considered parts machines. And they were actually found in a barn from what I'm told, which probably explains why things are pretty dirty here. Well, one thing we can tell about this first machine, which we'll call number 1, is that this has the Alps keyboard, which is the more desirable of the 2 or 3 different keyboard types that are on the Apple IIc. You can tell here that it has the Alps switches, and unfortunately we're missing a shift key, and then we have 2 broken keys, but at least the rest of this keyboard is in good shape. And you should be able to tell, besides this thing being somewhat dirty, not as bad as the other ones, it is also quite yellowed. This is the color that the case should be. These keys are also the original color. These are PBT caps, so they don't yellow, although the space bar does, and well, yeah, pretty yellow. You can tell this is a US model of the computer, which is understandable. This came from Washington State, I think. If you're not familiar with the IIc, this keyboard switch actually switches the keyboard layout here from QWERTY to Dvorak. And yeah, the keycaps themselves, well, they don't have dual symbols on them, so if you push that, you'd have to pull off every keycap if you want to rearrange the keys to have that Dvorak layout all the time. In Canada, on the other hand, this switches between a French-Canadian and a Canadian-English style layout, which I guess is the same as the US keyboard here. I also think in Canada, next to the 2 LEDs here, you have symbols. I don't remember what they are, but this one's a picture of a floppy disk, for instance, and this one is something else. Everything else on this machine seems okay. There's the floppy drive. It seems to be going up and down properly. And if we take a look at the back of the machine, we got a lot of rust here on the mouse/joystick port. That's the modem port. We have a monitor type port. It's not RGB. This has like a serial video output plus composite video and power and stuff like that. Got a lot of rust though. This machine was obviously exposed to quite a bit of moisture. Handle here is pretty filthy, and we have power switch, which seems to move okay, power input, and the printer port. The modem port is over here on this side. Looking at the underside of the machine, I know that some of the IIcs have a label that actually takes up this entire space, and this one has it in the case. I don't know what that means. I know there's a later revision of the IIc, and I guess when we open this thing up, we'll know if that has a later revision or not. I think it has a RAM expansion board capability. There's a connector there, and the earlier ones don't have that. Looking at the bottom of this thing, you can see evidence of water ingress as well. A bit of rust there on that screw, and it kind of dripped that way. And one thing to be aware of with these 2Cs is the feet often start to degrade and they get sticky. And if you put them down on your desk or on another computer, or especially something like a car seat or a couch, it transfers this white goo into the fabric and it's almost impossible to get out. We have a built-in speaker on the side there. And then we have the volume knob there and a headphone jack. That's something that's unique to the 2C. The later Apple IIgs also had a headphone jack, although it had no external volume knob. And the volume knob does turn, although it's very scratchy and probably needs a lot of Deoxit. Looks like it's got some yellowing there, and it's not yellowed there, which tells us that that's how it was when this thing was exposed to all the sunlight. And this thing has just had a really sad and horrible life. Look at all the dirt right there, poor thing. All right, so that's machine number 1. Moving on to machine number 2. This is another Alps keyboard, and that's great because the other one was missing these 2 keys and the shift key, and this one's only missing that key. And the space bar on this one is definitely broken, so the stabilizer there is either come off or is missing. But the keyboard otherwise looks okay. The keycaps are going to clean up without any kind of issue, and I don't know, the key switches themselves aren't going to be super dirty. But luckily, they're the same as on a bunch of other keyboards. And I have some spare parts keyboards. I can steal switches off if I need to. Got a lot of yellowing on this one as well. I just don't know what happened here. Something must have been sitting on top of the case, but why are there spots there? It could be that's just filth. You can kind of tell how much sunlight this thing was exposed to. This must have been sitting like maybe in a barn by a window and just many, many, many years of sun shining on it. And we have the same thing on the bottom of the plastic label. And we have feet that aren't gooey, that's kind of nice, and some severe yellowing, although we don't see all the signs of rust on the bottom. So maybe that's a good thing. Yep, this looks okay. We're missing the nuts there for some reason. Okay, well, there still does look like a lot of corrosion, but maybe that's just moisture, although that's, yeah, that doesn't look super good. It's kind of hard to see, but there's definitely a good amount of corrosion on the floppy drive port there. Just filthy, filthy, but there we go. And the handle is just very dirty as well. Really, these will need to be disassembled and are good scrubbing to happen on all the cases. All right, this is what we're gonna call machine number 3. Oh, this poor computer. You can hardly read the keycaps here. Is this like mold or something? Or this is why I'm wearing gloves. This is not an Alps keyboard, and it's super dirty, and the keys barely have travel. It feels absolutely horrible to type on. Who knows if this keyboard can ever work again? If the computer is even salvageable, who knows what's wrong with it? Floppy drive goes up and down at least. Another US model 2C. Missing the Apple logo, those do just come off. They're just adhesive holding them on. And actually, it's a good idea if you ever do retrobrite these cases, you should use a little heat and you can kind of use a little X-Acto blade and pop this off. That way you don't risk having the label fade, which happened on that other one. The level of filth on this just really makes me sad. This thing was obviously just left in a place that, well, it was forgotten for good. This has got the that label I was talking about. So the label itself is actually a metal sticker. So you see where it says, well, you can see the shininess of it there where it's got some scratches on it. You have to be careful when you retrobrite these cases as well because this paint can come off and fade as well. We can tell this has had a lot of water ingress. That doesn't bode well, at least for the mechanical parts of this thing, like the floppy drive. The 4 screws right here actually hold the floppy drive in, so the drive's on this side right there. And while it goes up and down, who knows if that can possibly work. Looking at the ports, yeah, it seems like less corrosion there than we've seen on the other machines. That's definitely got some rust on it. Things look okay here. It's a bit green and crusty there. And power switch does move. So machine number 3 is definitely in the dirtiest condition. It's just funny that none of the keys are broken on this thing. But the fact with all that rust coming out of the bottom or evidence of water ingress, I would be wary that this floppy drive may never work again. And then last but not least, here is machine number 4. It is by far the most yellowed. It's kind of an orange color, and that's beneath all the grime that's on here. Let's just for fun spray a little bit of Windex on there just to expose. exposed. Some of the plastic. I mean, that is outrageous how dirty and sad this computer is. So yeah, very, very yellow. We can see here we have an Alps keyboard as well with a different set of broken keys. Oddly enough, this one got yanked off somehow, but these are actually broken into the switches, as are these two. Spacebar is good though. The shift key looks like it's in very sad shape. It doesn't even go down. So there's a stabilizer on that. It must have got smashed or something and maybe bent, or who knows what's happening under there. We have loads of filth on here. Definitely a US model though, again with the labels there. And lots of fading on the logo there. Really, really dirty handle. And you can imagine this was probably like this. And that's why it's so dirty right there. Inside the machine, when I tilted it up, there's lots of stuff floating around inside. I assume it's dirt, but maybe it's rust stuff. Floppy drive does go up and down. And looking at the back here, not too bad. And we got some corrosion, of course. Bit of rust here and there. Filthy, filthy handle. And a power switch that does work. Does the volume knob turn? It does. You can just see the yellowing in effect there. There we go, if it's in focus. Wow, absolutely wow. Okay, well, I think the first thing to do is go back to machine number 1 and take it apart. It's probably not a good idea just to turn these things on without at least looking inside to see what's going on. There's clearly a lot of neglect going on here. And maybe if things are all corroded and rusty, I mean, who knows? All right, so taking apart the 2C, that's pretty easy actually. I can't remember if you have to take out the disk drive screws here or not. I'm gonna use my power screwdriver. I saw this on Torque Test. I really like this Dremel screwdriver. What's cool about this screwdriver that I really like is you don't have to push the button to turn it on, although you can. You can change the direction here. All you have to do is just push down onto the screw like that, and it comes right out. Easy peasy. So we're just going to take out all the screws on this machine. These 4 that hold the disk drive in are different than the rest of the case screws. Oh, incidentally, what I like about this also is it has a torque control. So when you're tightening, for instance, you don't strip out the heads because it will start to slip here before that happens. And I realized that the Phillips number 1 here is too big and it was actually slipping on there. So 2 screws near the handle. And then there are 2 screws here, 2 screws here. We just take these all out. As I do this, a lot of stuff is falling out of the machine. I mean, this is absolutely filthy here on the bench. I'll have to do a bunch of cleaning afterwards. All 6 of the case screws are out. And unfortunately, there's some clips on the front here and I think on the back. And that can just make it a little bit difficult to get the case apart. And I can never quite remember the right technique for getting this apart. I think a plastic spudger helps with the clip on the front here. That's probably the best place to start. There we go. So I put this in the little crack there and I tilted it that way, and that released the front of the case. And then the back is still clipped in. But I think once you kind of lift this up on the front side, you can get the back off a little bit easier. There we go, like that. There we go. So yeah, just sort of tilting it up and pushing it towards the back got it off. Well, there's the inside of the case. It's just kind of dirty, but otherwise in good shape. Nothing's wrong with this other than the extreme yellowing, of course. Now, looking inside of this thing, what's kind of interesting about it is I'm not used to the fact that the power supply here doesn't have shielding over it. The 2C itself has a big power brick. It's sort of like a big beige thing, and that outputs AC voltage. And you plug that into here, and this actually converts the AC down to DC, and then this is a DC to DC converter. And what's interesting about this power supply that's in here is you can actually supply it with DC directly into the power jack. You don't even need to give it AC. It's just being bridge rectified anyways, so putting DC in there works fine. Also, this has a very wide voltage range. In fact, when I do testing, I use this little pigtail I built here, and this is just plugged into a normal 12-volt, 4-amp power supply, and it works just fine. 15 volts works fine too, 16 volts works fine, but so does 12. So really getting one of these things working when you have a missing power supply, it's not that difficult. Once the top cover's off, you can just, well, pop that out like that. And because we took the 4 screws out of the floppy drive, once you lift up the keyboard here, move that out of the way a little bit, we can lift the floppy drive out. And the floppy drive just connects to the board with this ribbon cable right here. We can just lay that down out of the way, and well, that actually turns. Amazing. And looking at the board revision that's in here, this is absolutely one of the later Apple IIcs. It's not a 2C Plus, so it doesn't have the accelerator built in, but it doesn't have the 1-bit wide DRAMs that the earlier models have. They have a whole row of DRAMs here for 64K and then the auxiliary 64K for 128 total. Instead, this machine uses these 4 chips as DRAM. These are 4 bits wide each, so 64 times 4, so 2 of these for 64K and another 2 for another 64K. And this is that RAM expansion connector I was talking about, and it allowed additional RAM to be installed into these with a RAM board that kind of went under the keyboard right here in this area. And I actually don't have any Apple IIcs that have that particular connector, so I don't even know how much RAM you can go up to, but I think there were cards that could do like up to 1 megabyte of memory. And to facilitate that additional memory, works like pretty much all the Apple II RAM cards, is it does bank switching in that upper 64K. And there are a bunch of programs like AppleWorks and other things that can take advantage of that additional memory. Now, I don't know if a telltale sign, if you have a machine that has a later motherboard revision, is not having that full-size sticker and having it actually molded into the case like this.
It seems Apple themselves even sold a memory expansion card for the 2C, and it went up to 1 megabyte. I know third parties like Applied Engineering also made these cards. And it seems there's a very obvious way to see if you have a machine that has the expansion connector. You got to look for model number A2S4100. The regular Apple IIc, it's A2S4000. They even have a little handy diagram showing you the difference between the 2 revisions. There is a modern recreation of the RAM card called the Apple IIc RAM Express 2 Plus from Apple II Heaven, $70, although out of stock, which is typical, like everything always is from these guys. It does have a real-time clock, as you can see, and it plugs into the motherboard, and it's very little compared to the original one.
Which incidentally, you could take these power supplies out. There are just 2 screws here and there. Take those out, and this actually slides out of this connector. There are no components underneath it. It's just the PCB is there. So there's no reason to take that out, but unless you need to service this, like swap out caps or whatever. I don't think there's any other real differences between the later versions and the earlier ones, other than I think these have a later ROM revision, and that's the ROM chip right here. But you can use the ROM revisions from this board on the earlier machines. They're all pretty much compatible with each other. I think everything else on here is totally the same. We can see from date codes 87, 87, 87. So this is obviously a later Apple IIc. I'm not actually sure when they stopped making the Apple IIc, but definitely it came out in 1984. So this one is one from the later years. Now, I gotta say, when we look at this thing, it's really clean on the inside. I don't think this one had any of the rust evidence on the bottom. Well, I guess it had a little bit, but that just could be dirt or something. I don't know, because when we look inside here, well, there's a bit of corrosion on the ports, but everything inside is pretty clean. Looking for any kind of green crusties here. There's lots of spider bodies and dead bugs and stuff, but I don't really see anything. One potential issue is that because this was exposed to a lot of moisture and whatnot, I already tore my glove, is that the sockets are in bad shape. So we may have issues just with the sockets not making good contact, and a little Deoxit should go a long way to get that working. If we take a look at the keyboard here, this is the Alps version as we know, and it's kind of nice because it actually has a metal plate here. It just makes it nice and strong. Some of the other keyboards just have these like plastic bars and stuff that go over them. They're not nearly as good quality as this. This is a very sturdy keyboard, doesn't really have any flex. If you do need to switch out some of these key switches, all you need to do is remove the solder from this, and then you can pop these out. They're not the easiest to get out because there's little clips and stuff here, but it's the same as any other Alps keyboard. Now, I gotta say, when I had my Apple IIc as a kid, I got it in, I think around 1984, and I don't think any of those early ones had the Alps keyboard like this. And the other keyboard is pretty terrible. It's really mushy. It doesn't feel good to type on. And really, this feels, even though this one is filthy and the key switches are dirty, it still feels really nice to type on. It's very clicky, very positive feeling. All the earlier keyboards just feel like mush and totally horrible. And I'm pretty sure that's what I had. The floppy drive here, it's an Alps mechanism, very similar to the Commodore 1541. In fact, I think it's almost an identical mechanism. It's single-sided, doesn't have any of the extra sensors like track 0 or index sensors. The only difference is Apple has this little PCB mounted onto it, and that is the standard Apple II controller, I guess you can call it. On the 1541, the things like the heads and the steppers and the motors just fly off onto leads, and they plug into the main controller on the 1541 with the 6502 on it. I'm pretty sure this is just a standard Apple II floppy drive connector, meaning you can plug in any Apple II floppy drive into here, and it will totally work. As for finding one that fits inside the computer, if this is bad, well, that's a different story. I think the next thing to do with machine number 1 is just give this thing a test. I'm going to plug in this cable here, which goes to my RGB to HDMI. It's better than using composite, at least for video capture scenarios like this. And I'm just gonna make sure that's off, and I'm gonna plug in my little pigtail here. And let's just see if this thing works. The white box you see there is the RGB to HDMI. I've already pre-configured it for the 2C. I tested with one of my, clean and good 2Cs here. Let's see what happens. Okay, that is amazing. Well, the floppy drive's not connected, so we wouldn't hear the normal seek sound, but control reset exited right out. Let's hit the Apple keys control reset and should go to the little diagnostic mode. And this generally on the later ROM revisions actually does test everything like the RAM and stuff. It should tell us if there's any kind of RAM problems on this. It's not the most comprehensive RAM test, but it's certainly better than nothing. And I can't believe this thing, which was a parts machine, is just working. Now, one thing I want to mention, and we've got system okay, so the RAM is working, is that there's no RF shielding on here. And I don't know if on the later versions that's just normal. The floppy drive sits on top of the motherboard here, as does the keyboard, and potentially that is enough shielding. And the bottom has this metallic paint here, which I think does a good job of shielding as well. But I'm just a bit surprised that there's no shielding on here. I could have swore on the earlier machines that there is some shielding. Let's go back to basic here. I am curious if this keyboard works at all. I mean, yes, it does. Seems to be just fine. All right, for doing additional testing, instead of testing the floppy drive right away, we're gonna plug this thing into it. This is a Smartport SD. So this is a little Arduino in there. It has an SD card on there, and you can copy bootable drive images onto there. Let's turn the machine off. Plugs into the floppy drive, and for machines like the Apple IIc and the 2GS, it actually lets you boot hard drive images off this very inexpensive thing. I just 3D printed a case. Allows you to have 4 images on there, and you can select which one you want on the button there, and 32 megabyte images each. And that, of course, includes things like Total Replay, which is a great collection of Apple II games that you can just boot. So we're gonna turn this on, and what happens is it tries to boot the floppy drive, and it's gonna give up, of course, because the floppy drive is not connected. And I think if the drive were connected, it would eventually give up and say, check disk drive. And what it would then do is it would fail back to this thing. Because there's no floppy drive, I'm just gonna control reset and type PR number 7, which I thought that should boot the Smartport, but I'm not familiar with the ROM revision here. Let's try PR number 4. What that message is talking about there is you can take that RAM card, which would go under the keyboard, and configure it as a RAM disk, and you can format it, and you can put ProDOS on there, and I don't know about DOS 3.3. And then if you control reset or even reboot the computer, PR number 4 will actually boot that memory card. But what I don't know how to do is with this ROM is boot off this Smartport device. So I'm just gonna try a couple different boot sequences here. Oh, PR number 5 is normally reserved for the 3.5-inch floppy drive, which if you use an Apple IIc, it can only be a Smartport type device, which is the same as what this is. The Smartport 3.5-inch floppy drive is actually very similar to the Commodore 1541, or more like the 1581. And it actually has a 6502 processor in it, and it communicates to the machine over this Smartport interface, which is very much just like the normal floppy signaling, but instead of it moving the physical head around, it's actually using a packetized protocol that can support hard drives, it can support all sorts of different devices, including these 3.5-inch drives. The Apple IIc Plus and the 2GS does support Smartport type disk drives and hard drives, but it can also use the dumb style disk drive like the Unidrive 3.5, which also works on the Macintosh. And that actually just communicates directly with the disk drive as if it was a 5.25-inch disk drive. It doesn't use any kind of packetized protocol. So it is a little bit faster, but the 1 megahertz processor that's on the Apple IIc here cannot directly communicate with that 800K disk drive. It doesn't really have enough horsepower to do so. If you have an Apple IIc Plus and you're running in 1 megahertz mode, it can communicate with the dumb 3.5-inch drive, but that communication happens using an ASIC, a special chip that's designed to communicate with the disk drive at full speed. Takes a lot of the burden, I think, off the 6502, which just normally isn't fast enough at 1 megahertz to talk to the disk drive. I might be a little bit off base with the ins and outs of all this stuff. It's very complicated Apple disk drive thing. They all use that same 19-pin connector, but there's all these like incompatibilities in their Mac disk drives, and they're ones that work on Mac and Apple IIgs and 2C Plus, and then not the 2C like this, and Smartport, and it's a bit all over the place. But the best of my understanding, I think what I've said is accurate. And with a machine like this, you need to have a Smartport 3.5-inch disk drive, which maybe that was called the Unidisk 3.5. I can't really remember, to be honest. The names are confusing as well. It's all very confusing. But what we can absolutely see here is that the Smartport hard drive emulator here is working, and this computer freaking works. It's actually not a parts machine. It's fully operational except for like these broken keys here. And what we can do is let's try loading up a game here. And I want to turn up the speaker and let's see if they can actually make some sound. I picked a game that doesn't really have any music, so maybe that was the wrong thing to pick, but it does have a little bit of sound. And oddly enough, it's scratchy, the knob, the volume knob, like as in dirt, but it doesn't sound like it's in trouble. Oh yeah, we have sound. How do I go down? Can't remember. Ah! Yeah, so as you can hear, there is some sound coming out of this thing. I'm trying, now that I picked up the girl there, I'm trying to find that little creature that went by. I don't know. I don't know what the names of these creatures are called. This game, though, I love this game. I think I've talked about this before on the channel. When I was growing up, I absolutely freaking loved this game. And it's so cool to see, oh, there we go, that ended the level. It's so cool to see it working really well on, on this machine and over the total replay here. So this computer does seem to be working fine. If there was trouble with the RAM, it would have detected it. Let's exit out of here. It would have detected it when we did the diagnostic. Let's try PR number 3 to go to 80 columns mode. Yeah, that looks completely fine as well. For machine number 1, so far so good. All that's really left is see if this floppy drive is actually working. So we'll just reconnect it there and just put this back down in the case. With the keyboard moved out of the way, you just kind of sit this back down into the case, and that's because the keyboard slots in to the disk drive there. It's actually supported by the drive. Gives it a little bit of extra strength in the middle here. Even though this has these thick bars, still if you put too much weight on there, well, it could bend it. All right, let's see what happens. Do we have the headbang? Headbang sounds normal. And I forgot to plug the video connector in, so let's just try this one more time. But it did stop spinning, which indicates that it would say check disk drive. Yep, there we go. And it's curious that when the drive's not connected, it doesn't actually say that message. That's interesting. I didn't know that that was the case. That means if I plug in the Smartport hard drive emulator here, it would auto boot off of it. So as soon as this thing said check disk drive or gave up accessing this drive, it would then fail over to the Smartport. So we just turn it on again, move this dirty handle out of the way, and there it goes, loading total replay. Freaking awesome. Now the only thing I really wanted to try is, there we go, I wanted to see something that was using double high-res graphics, which is that right there. And that means it's using all of the RAM, 128K, and all the extra features that regular Apple II games don't use is in play. So we're loading here, and we'll see if this game works. Problem with double high-res is, yeah, it does give you 16 colors, but wow, it's really slow because there's just not a lot of horsepower in this thing to push pixels. Now, Apple II machines are a monochrome machine inherently. It only supports zeros and ones when it comes to the video output, and it takes advantage of artifact color to display color. And the RGB to HDMI actually does the decoding, and I think there's a way, there we go, I can switch it off, and that's the monochrome mode. So if you plug this into a standard monochrome monitor, that's what you'd be seeing with those vertical lines. And we can turn the decoding back on. So the color rendering may not be exactly what you would expect, and that's because artifact color is very much dependent on NTSC color with the tint control. And yeah, so anyways. Anyhow, this game, whatever this is, does seem to work. K to play with keyboard. Sure, I don't really know this game. It's probably really slow and sluggish. Pretty much every double high-res game I've ever played is terrible when it comes to performance. It's fine for adventure games where you're looking at pictures or paint programs and stuff like that. But, okay, we'll turn the speaker down. It's currently loading. Little activity light here. This red LED is going to indicate it's doing something. But any of the Apple II games that have any kind of like fast action and they run on these 1 megahertz machines, there's just so much complexity to the way the graphics modes works with all this interleaved pixels and artifact color and stuff like that, that the performance is always pretty abysmal. Looks like it's not running in double high res anymore. This is just running in normal Apple II color mode now. Yeah, there we go. So cyan, orange, green, and purple, and white and black. There you go. You got 6 total colors. How do we drive this car? I don't know. Somehow we do. And I'm revving up the engine and driving into the side, and you can see it's just that performance is really not great. But what we're looking at here is definitely 1977 graphics. And if you think about machines from 1977, hey, it's pretty capable, and that's awesome. All right, well, what's left to do now is see if the floppy drive is actually working. And what we need to do is try to clean the heads. So we're gonna use my single-sided floppy disk here, cleaning disk that is. Put a little 99% IPA on there. We'll slide this in here, and we'll turn this thing back on. In fact, I need to unplug this so that doesn't try to boot off of it. I think it's gonna work. I really think it's gonna work. Doesn't look too dirty there. I have a copy of Fat City, which is the game I always pretty much demo on these machines. Slide this in. If I ruin this disk, I can make another one. It's no big deal. And let's reboot the machine. See what happens. That's normal for this disk. For whatever reason, it does that. On even machines that have totally clean working drives. It freaking works. And we got sound. Okay, so machine number 1, absolute survivor. Absolute survivor. Cool. So this machine was a parts machine, and yet it's just dirty, and that's it. Well, and it's got a couple broken keys. So let's see about getting these stems out. It can be kind of tricky. I think what I like to do normally is, I'm glad Apple put a little hole in there, or Alps, whoever made these keycaps, put a little hole in the middle of the stem that's broken off, because we need to try to extract that. And I like to try to find a small screw, and if it's small enough, it can fit inside that little hole there, and then we can actually try to extract the broken stem. All right, I think it's small enough, but the problem is the hole's not big enough, so I'm going to use this little engraving tool to try to enlarge the hole here. I just want to get it large enough that I can start the screw, because this one doesn't really have a pointy tip on it. And if I can get it started. Okay, there we go. That's worked. So I just want to demonstrate, see how that's actually in there. Now you just use something like this, and we pull up, and we should be able to get, look at that, came right out, see? And no damage done to that either. So now we just unscrew the screw here and repeat for its little neighbor here. There we go. Easy peasy. Unfortunately, these missing keycaps, I don't have them. So we're gonna have to mix and match from the other keyboards, which means I'm gonna have one parts board, but that's fine. I'm sure some of the switches on here are probably no good or don't work very well, and I have to do some swapping anyways. So machine number 1, this thing fully works perfectly. You just need 3 keycaps. So I'm gonna loosely assemble this. I'm not really gonna do all the cleaning and washing that's necessary in this video. This video is mainly just for the testing part, to see what works and what doesn't. So machine number 1 works great. And look at the filthy mess that's left behind on the bench after taking just that first, not that dirty machine apart. Wow. All right, I'm pretty sure that this was machine number 2. I'm just gonna do a jump cut here, taking this thing apart. Interesting, I didn't do that, but someone partially took this thing apart already. All right, inside machine number 2, we have the fully shrouded power supply. Now, maybe the shroud was taken off on the other one, maybe for some service or something, and never put back. This has the Alps keyboard as well. This is the one that has the broken space bar though. We can tell that this is the version that has the RAM card in it as well, so that's kind of cool. So now I have 2 of those machines. Let's get the floppy drive out of here. Looking at the bottom of the floppy drive, we have a little bit of rust here. It does spin, so that's a good sign. I noticed that this case doesn't have that paint on there, and it looks like this actually does have an RF shield under the board. Nothing on the top side though. So I guess that's just normal for these machines to not have a topside RF shield. Alps board though looks the same. It's just, yep, very dirty. Ah, I forgot about these. Was this on the other machine? I don't remember seeing it. It's a little gasket thing that actually pushes up against the bottom of the floppy drive so that it actually is grounded to the entire motherboard, because those screws that go into it are just in through the plastic. So yeah, these 2 gaskets here help with that whole shielding thing, I guess. Let's hook up the RGB to HDMI in the power supply, turn that off, and we'll just see if, well, this one works as well. All right, here we go, 3, 2, 1. Okay. I think this one's working as well. It went into the diagnostic mode because the keyboard's not connected. So we just have to plug this keyboard in. And I think this one's working too. That's unbelievable. There's no parts here. These are all good machines, just really, really dirty. And in case you're wondering why it runs diagnostic mode, and that's because the two Apple keys are the same thing as the paddle inputs, or I'm sorry, the joystick button inputs. And when the keyboard's not connected, those are not pulled down to ground, or I can't remember if they're pulled up to 5 volts or ground, whatever happens. That doesn't happen without the keyboard or a joystick plugged in. Therefore, this thing will just go automatically into the diagnostic mode as soon as you turn it on. It's the same thing as holding these two Apple buttons down. System okay, no issues whatsoever with this machine either. I mean, okay, we have some bad keys on here. I'm not surprised. Let's see if this thing can run any software off the Smartport hard drive. So remember, without the floppy drive hooked up, it'd never go to that. So PR, we don't have a P key. So there's no way to, oh, wait, there it is, started working. I was about to say there's no way to boot this without the P key working. Get the caps lock down. PR number 5. Total replay, it freaking works. That's awesome. So I think it was Time Cop was the game with the double high res, something like that. There it is, Techno Cop, and it's working. So machine number 2 just freaking works as well. The keyboard's in worse shape, obviously, but yeah, that is absolutely wild. Parts machine's my butt, left for dead, and they freaking work. It's not that dirty on the inside. Obviously, we got some corrosion here on the ports, but hey, these things are freaking survivors. Survivors. While we're here, I'm just going to pop off these keys here, the caps that I need to make that other keyboard good again. One thing I noticed about this keyboard is check out the legends. They are so faded. Look at that. It's like a purplish color. Just, I guess they're printed on there. They're not double shot, obviously. It's just dye sublimation printing, and they fade with the sun. So be careful of sun brightening your Apple IIcs because the keyboard can be affected. Floppy drive on this machine is certainly in rough shape, but who knows? It may just work as well. So let's just plug this in, give it a test. First, let's turn it on and see if we get that seeking sound. It sounds fine, honestly. So we'll get the cleaning floppy here. Bunch of IPA on there. Let's just slide that over into the center like so. And we'll try to slide this in. It's very hard to slide in for some reason. Maybe there's some warpage in there or something, I don't know. Spinning, it's a good sign. So we'll just reboot to get that spinning a little bit more. Clean those heads, why don't you? Yes, yes, yes. There we go. Doesn't look too dirty. In with the Fat City floppy here. See what happens. Nope, check disk drive. So, okay, our first actual failure, floppy drive. Now what we should do is I'm just gonna pop this disk out of here. I'm gonna take this floppy drive out of here, and I'll grab this floppy drive that was from machine number 1 that was actually working. We'll see if there's an issue on the motherboard here, or there's just a problem with the physical disk drive. I have to imagine we're dealing with physical issues due to the amount of corrosion and whatnot we saw there. Let's turn that on. Yeah, it's loading fine. Here we go, we have working sound. It's very scratchy, the volume knob, but yeah, it's unbelievable. And it just works. This computer is a survivor, except for the floppy drive. Now, of course, machine 1 and 2 are the least dirty and neglected looking ones, so I'm not surprised that they work well. And we'll just draw an X on this disk drive here. This drive probably can be made to work. It'd just be a future repair episodes, I suppose. Now, of course, I started with the 2 least dirty machines and corroded machines, right? These are the 2 that are most likely to work, but I'm still amazed that we're looking good. All right, here is machine number 3. Guaranteed to mess up my bench a lot worse than it's already messed up. Let's flip this over. Oh yeah, stuff is just falling out of here. Ooh, the rust, the rust. All right, I'm gonna take this apart quickly. All right, we have a screw here that's just stuck. Cannot get it out, even with the torque setting up. So we're gonna have to use some manual screwdriver action here, and I'm gonna rock it back and forth here and there. Oh, I think it's gonna break the head right off. That is stuck in there. I'm going back and forth. Oh no, oh yeah. I think that's why it didn't work. Kind of gives us an idea of what's going on inside this poor computer. And now moving on to these other screws, I think we're in a similar boat. We have some serious corrosion going on. Yeah, that's not good. All right, all the screws are out. I can't believe how dirty this is. I just can't believe it. I'm not sure this is completely horribly yellow, to be honest. Let's do the old clean spot thing here, like we did before. Yeah, I mean, that's not terrible when it comes to yellowing, to be honest. This case is not coming apart. I think I just realized there's a sticker here. We got to get that off. Yep, Apple gave you these stickers. They were included with the machine. And it seems like the owner of this machine wanted to, well, make sure everyone knew that their 2C was a Apple computer. Maybe when this label came off, they stuck that on there. All right, the back is off. There we go. How's this look on the inside? Rust on those metal clips there. All right, inside this machine, lots of corrosion on the floppy drive there. This keyboard, as I mentioned, is the terrible version and slides out there. And you can see here that strengthening bar because it doesn't have a metal base plate of any kind. In fact, it's just a PCB here, and this is all that gives it the strength. So it's just kind of floppy, but not terrible with that strengthening bar. But for whatever reason, Apple installed this sort of rubber membrane underneath the keys. And when this is in good clean shape, it just feels mushy and horrible to type on. So you can actually remove every single keycap and then pull this rubber membrane off. I think it's like a dust shield or something, but it just makes the typing experience horrible. And these keyboards are interchangeable with the other ones. You can swap them out. It completely works. Let's get the drive out here. Oh boy, oh boy. So does this spin? Yes. It's very stiff though. Let's open it. Yeah, it turns, but it's very stiff. Probably not going to work, but who knows? Stranger things have happened. This is obviously the earlier revision of the motherboard, but we have 16 of these chips here for the 128K. We don't have that RAM expansion connector that came with the later version, and this will have, of course, the earlier ROM chip. But like I said, you could take the ROM out of the other one. I think it works in this one, although don't quote me on that. Gaskets are in place. This one is kind of rusty. And we know that there's an RF shield on the bottom of this motherboard. And let's just get this out of here and we can look at how rusty that shield is there. I'm probably just gonna jettison the shield. I took the 2 screws for the power supply out. So to get this out, you just slide it towards the back of the computer and pop that out. So there it is. As I mentioned, there's no components under there, just a little rubber bumper there to keep it off the PCB. You do have to remove it to get the motherboard out though, because it's actually screwed into the bottom plastic here. So all the screws are out except for this one and this one. And I think this one will come out without too much issue. But the other one next to it is very, very rusty in there. And I don't think there's much left. Oh, I got it. Okay, sweet. Guess the good thing it's screwed into plastic is actually helpful. Take these gaskets off. And now the motherboard kind of comes out and you have to kind of jimmy it out of this area here. There we go. Oh, okay. I thought that, oh, I was going to say, I thought there's an RF shield. There is. Oh boy. Let's move the motherboard out of the way. So there's a piece of paper here that keeps it from shorting out. It's like zebra stripes. That's so kind of cool looking. Poor Apple IIc. I think they plastic melted this into place here, so you have to pry it out and kind of force it out. So we'll do that in a moment. We'll just move this out of the way. I mean, it's pretty. Would you ever expect to open your 2C and see zebra patterns? I don't think so. We'll throw that paper away. Look at this mess that's left behind here. This is kind of shocking. I'm just gonna try to move this out of the way because I was going to put the motherboard back down onto the bench here. Okay, there we go. Let's take a look at the motherboard on the bottom side. Yep, there's rust, but I don't see anything that should give us any trouble here. It's in pretty good shape. It's just very dirty, but a good scrub should probably make this thing work again. Power switch is working. Power supply doesn't have anything floating around inside. I don't think the water got into this necessarily. So we'll plop this back into place here. And let's first plug into power and see if this thing has any kind of signs of life. Oh, there's no speaker, so we're not going to hear anything. So I'm going to grab the working floppy drive from machine number 1. Okay, I have the video connected. Let's see if we have any output. I'm just going to hold this off the board since there's no standoffs anymore. Oh, it is working. And the reason why the drive's not seeking is without the keyboard connected, it's going into the diagnostic mode right away. Unbelievable. So this is a very early ROM. The early ROM does this pattern. If you hold down both Apple keys, it's not actually doing an actual diagnostic here. It just sort of runs through this pattern. But what I need to do is plug in a keyboard, and I'm not even going to bother with this piece of junk. I mean, I suppose we can. Let's just plug it in. I doubt this thing is going to work at all. But it's seeking the drive. Oh, it's actually trying to boot the game too. So we know if this thing will work momentarily. It works. It works. Let's turn the sound up. Oh, there's no speaker hooked up. Obviously, we have no sound. Let's see. Does the keyboard work at all? Oh, it does work. I mean, barely, because the keys are so dirty. But what we can validate is this computer freaking works. It loaded Fat City right off that disk. And, well, I guess what we don't know is all the RAM is working because Fat City's only going to use the first 64K. Okay, I have the Smartport device connected up. Let's turn this on. Let's see if this can boot the Smartport. Gonna have to break out of this, and I think it's PR number 7 on this. Wow, there's a caps lock key is completely broken. It is really difficult to type on this. 7. Oh, nope. 7. Okay. Okay, no. I don't know what it's actually doing right now. Maybe it's trying to boot off the external floppy drive. I just don't think this thing supports Smartport devices at all. So we cannot boot Total Replay. Well, other than this keyboard being an abomination of typing, it does seem like machine number 3, it does absolutely, positively work. Freaking amazing. Oh, we should probably try the floppy drive just for funsies, shouldn't we? I wanted to look at date codes. 84, 5th week. 83, 47th week. 84, 5th week. So yeah, early machine. It makes me sad that it was so left for dead. But anyways, it does work, and that's cool. Let's plug in its original floppy drive here. Now we'll grab one of the Alps keyboards here. It's a little bit easier to type on. Oh, although this one actually has some busted keys on it, doesn't it? I don't think this drive is going to work anyway, so it doesn't really matter. All right, let's turn this on. Do we even hear a seek? No, there's a seek sound. That's amazing. IPA on the cleaning disc. Oh, I put way too much on there. Oh, well. And it goes in upside down, of course, because the drive is upside down. It does spin. Good speed control there. You can see in my LED lights here. It's perfect. Let's power cycle this again. It really sounds like the head is trying to move. Let me turn this off and move the head manually. Yeah, I mean, the heads move. Wow. You can see there's all this gunk on the front edge of the drive there. All right, Fat City, here it is, side A. So that means flipped over. All right, here we go. It's loading. I'm gonna have to power this off because I don't have the video connected here. Look at all the filth on my bench. Wow. All right, here we go again. I can't believe it works. I can't believe it. This drive is in such dirty shape. Okay, no, it's having issues. I mean, it's trying. Oh, it loaded the game. I mean, let's turn the speaker up. I don't have the speaker hooked up. I keep doing that. Yeah, the head's moving around in there. Obviously, probably needs some more cleaning, maybe some more lubrication on the heads, but it freaking reads. So far, out of all of these machines, all we've had is one floppy drive that didn't work properly. I feel that one might have something on the controller board on it that's the problem, unless the heads are open or something like that. But this is absolutely stunning that these machines so far are all working. And I guess with machine number 3 here, the keyboard was in such rough shape that, you know, it's not really usable, but I think with the cleaning, it might actually be fixable. Well, because I hardly believe it, I'm just gonna put a tick mark on the side of this disk drive here that it works. And I guess we should put a tick mark on the PSU here so we know that's good. And that is machine number 3, an early machine, early 1984, that first Rev Zero ROM, and it freaking works. Left for dead, rusty on the bottom, and yeah, that works. All right, here it is, machine number 4, another Alps board. Look at this, it's so dirty. Now, it's sort of my recollection on the RAM card that's in these later machines, in that some of them have batteries on them that actually allow you to save that RAM disk when you power the machine off. Like, it keeps the RAM alive somehow. I might be mistaking that for something else, but I kind of recall seeing a 2C that had some serious leakage. Oh, there's a lot of stuff floating around inside this machine. I kind of recall seeing a 2C that had tons of leakage and kind of destroyed everything inside because of that RAM board with the battery.
Applied Engineering made a whole line of different RAM cards that plugged into the Apple IIc, including some with these data century batteries. This is like the one in the Plexus that leaked, and I think that is what can cause massive damage. It's a NiCad battery. These cards are pretty interesting. These actually do not plug into the RAM expansion connector, and they actually replace your CPU. So you unplug the original 6502 and you pop this board in, and this adds the extra memory, the real-time clock. And there's also some really interesting features that these can also add. They add a Z80 processor so you can run CPM. And then optionally, you can use a 65C816 16-bit processor as well. I have no idea if any software was ever written that took advantage of the 16-bit processor. Applied Engineering also made a version of their RAM Express card that plugged into the expansion connector. You can see it right there. It works on the 2Cs with the expansion connector and the Apple IIc Plus. Comes up to 1 megabyte of size. And of course, it's pretty expensive, $700 in whatever year this came out for the 1 meg version, plus $60 for a clock. Unfortunately, I think the RAM expansion connector is missing some of the signals that are available on the CPU itself, which is why you don't have the Z80 expansion capability of the other card that plugs into the CPU socket. Although Applied Engineering made a little separate Z80 board that did plug into the CPU socket, you can see the 65C02 right there. It's quite possible you could combine this board here with the RAM expansion board on these more modern 2Cs, with the RAM expansion connector that is, to get Z80 and a full 1 meg of RAM.
And there we are, our second machine that has the unshrouded power supply. I could see what was floating around in here. It was pine needles. So that's why that's why there was a lot of noise in here. Popping the keyboard out. Yes, we have tons of tree detritus here. So, but the bottom of the keyboard looks really good. That's nice. And yep, another Alps board, but we have a missing key and we have 4 broken off keys. And again, it does type a whole lot better. Oh yeah, this is the one that has this smashed shift key as well. Poor thing. Popping the floppy drive out. We do not have the RAM card, so therefore we don't have any of that leakage that I said was possible in there. This thing is dirty inside. It is dirty. I'm gonna at least tip this over my trash can and dump some of this out. All right, well the bench is even worse. I do notice that even these later ones, I didn't realize that they have the RF shield on the bottom as well. Besides being really, really dirty, everything in here, yep, seems totally fine. I don't see any caps that look bad. I mean, we're looking good. Power switch moves properly. Yeah, amazing. Absolutely amazing. The floppy drive, though, is, well, really dirty on the top, but I don't see corrosion. Okay, well, yep, there's some corrosion here on the bottom of the motor. Interesting is that I don't know where that comes from exactly. I guess it's water pouring through and pooling up on the bottom before it drips onto the motherboard. I'm not seeing a lot of corrosion anywhere on the board itself, but because this actually spins, why don't we just plug it in? Because every other 2C has worked so far, and we'll just connect up the keyboard that was in this machine as well. Let's see what happens. Here we go. I mean, that sounds like it's working as freaking well. Here we go again with the video connected. These machines are simply amazing. Let's hold down those keys and reset the machine. There we go, in the diagnostic mode. Some of the keys aren't working very well. And let's see if it passes its diagnostics. Now the good thing is, looking at this keyboard, as we go to look at this Alps board here, it passed its diagnostics. This has the bad space bar. This has a working space bar. And we have these keys in place, and the shift key looks out of whack here. And hopefully there's a stabilizer problem on the main board. It's not on the keycap, because if the keycap is good, I can get that onto here and we have a good stabilizer bar. So that means I can make 2 good Alps boards, and this can be my spare parts one. So it's passing its diagnostics. The disk drive sounds like it's okay. Let's get the cleaning floppy into it. And Oh boy, I am just simply amazed. I had a feeling that these all worked, but they don't just work, but they were running software. And other than that one floppy drive, they're just totally working. I can see the head moving around inside there as you hear the head bang sound. It's not too dirty. Yeah, actually, there's a bit of a smudge there. So maybe that did a clean. The disc here, my Fat City disc, is filthy though. But hey, it's okay. I can make another, as I said. Here we go. Oh. Okay. Sounds like the head's having trouble moving. Okay, what I'm going to do is pop the disc out of there, and I'm going to take the cover off the drive here, and let's see if we can lubricate the head assembly. Okay, so having moved that back and forth a bunch of times, let's turn it on. That seems normal. Let's put this disc back in here and see if we can actually load this game now. But let's see what happens here. So what was happening before when it was trying to load, besides the head banging, is it was just, the game works now. That was all it needed, some lubrication. There you go. It's working. What I heard before is it sounded as it was trying to seek, it was just kind of making weird, not normal seeky noises. I don't know how to explain it better. It just sounded weird, and that made me feel the head was stuck. But there, it just loaded up absolutely perfectly on the second try. No issues whatsoever. Oddly enough, this drive is very quiet. Like, the whole head stepper assembly just doesn't make the same loud Apple noises that you're used to. Look how filthy this disk drive is, and this computer just works. It just works. That's absolutely amazing. What we can do is we can plug in the Smartport drive here into this very crusty port, because this machine will support loading off Smartport. So we'll take the disk out there, and we'll let this finish booting here, and it will start loading off this. There it goes. Total replay. Let's hit the T key and try to get over to the time cop or techno cop or whatever it was. There it is. Double high res working flawlessly. We'll try loading game. We'll load Droll here. This keyboard, even though it's in such rough shape, it does work. I'm sure it's got keys that don't work, but I'm amazed. I am amazed. Let's see if we can start the game here. There it goes. Spacebar. Doesn't seem to work. That is the fire key with this game. Anyhow, with that, that has been a very dirty episode of Adrian's Digital Basement, where I've checked out 4 pine needle just fell out of this thing, 4 Apple IIcs, left for dead, barn found, all categorized as parts machine. But the reality is they were all just dirty. And other than that one floppy drive that wasn't actually reading anything, that'll have to be a future repair episode. I will put a caveat that I'll try to clean the heads a little bit more, and if it starts working, then it's not going to be a repair episode. I'll put a pinned comment down below to let you know that that disk drive worked. And if that's the case, then all 4 of these machines, other than the sad state of the keyboards, are absolutely working freaking perfectly. This just shows how resilient and reliable these computers were in the 80s, and I can't believe that if you had a modern day MacBook laptop, for instance, and you left it in a barn with the cover open so dirt and water was falling onto it, that it wouldn't just work. Although maybe it would, I don't know. But it's amazing that these computers, 40 years old, they still work. They still work perfectly. So let me know what you think about this video down in the comment section. If you liked it, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do. Huge thanks to my patrons. Their names are scrolling beside the screen to make it possible to do this full time. You know, all the usual YouTube junk and all that kind of stuff. And that's going to be that. So stay healthy, stay safe. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.